Blog Talk Radio.
The cycle of tyranny. From bondage to spiritual faith. From spiritual faith to great courage. From courage to liberty. From liberty to abundance. From abundance to complacency. From complacency to apathy. From apathy to dependence. From dependence back into bondage.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to another episode of Lori's Pop News Radio. It's September the 11th. I'm your host, Lori. So, 9/11 anniversary. Yeah, I'm not going to get into that. There's plenty of people out doing that I heard today already. So, this evening I was going to kind of try to wrap some of this up with the title, the trust and that type of thing, the different positions that there are in each trust and what trusts we hold and that type of thing. So hopefully I can wrap up some of those loose ends. The original trust actually comes from out of Genesis. And when the Lord created the heavens and the earth, and he gave to Adam the command to dress and have dominion over the creation, that really was the first trust. And as I had mentioned before about the Sanctum Unum Papal Bull, that is actually based on that trust because, of course, they believed that the Pope was through Peter and succession of the popes that they had control over that title. But I'll get back to that in a bit. The basic structure of a trust, I want to kind of get into that on a basic level in case people don't maybe understand some of these things or how they work. When you separate title on something, land or monies or whatever, you separate that into two different areas. You have what they call legal title, and then you have equitable title. And this is when a trust is formed. And the basic positions, and it gets a little different if you're talking about an actual trust or corporate structure. So though there can be some different names, I'm going to use some of the more common names, at least of what I've heard anyway. You have a grantor who's the one that actually owns this property, whatever it may be, and they are the ones that actually set this trust up. And within that trust, you've got three basic main positions. You have one that would be called the administrator, the one that administers the trust, that directs how it is handled. And then you have trustees. The trustees are the ones that are actually responsible to make sure that the trust is carried out for the benefit of the beneficiary. And obviously from the name, the beneficiary is who this trust is to be a benefit for. And it's very important to know where you stand in that trust. Now, if we're the ones that make that trust, it's kind of obvious. I mean, either you're the grantor or you're one of the trustees, you're the beneficiary. But when you have trusts that are set up, oftentimes without our knowledge, it gets a bit hazy. And as I said, with the original trust being that with the Lord to Adam and to man, anthropos, that was the original trust, and then when we started with these birth certificates and that type of thing, that sets up another trust, and so I'm going to try to go through that. So when you are born, I've touched on this before, you have a record of live birth, and that is a trust actually that your parents set up for you. And in that particular case, your parents would be the grantors and actually the administrators until you become of age of majority. and the state becomes the trustee. They're the ones that keep the legal title, and they keep the records. They're responsible for keeping those records and making sure that the trust is taken care of properly. And then, of course, you, as the little child, would be the beneficiary. Now, where we start getting a little bit hazy here is when that record of live birth is made, there's another trust that's made, but the state actually makes it. So when a mother goes and gives birth to a child, she fills out this record of live birth, but what they get in the mail days or weeks later is a birth certificate. Now, that second trust is actually a creature of the state. And that's where it starts to get a bit hazy, because theoretically, you as the child are still the beneficiary, and the state actually becomes the administrator and the trustee of that trust. Well, when you go into court after you've gotten all your different licenses, be it driver's license, marriage license, whatever, and you get called into court for whatever reason, they actually try to reverse those roles. They try to make you to be the trustee of that trust. And the trustee is not really the best place to be there, because the trustee is the one that's responsible to make sure that that trust is carried out properly. And it's the one with the onus of responsibility. And so there's a little bit of role reversal, and then, of course, the judge would be acting as administrator there. And what's happening now is more people are starting to understand this, and they're actually challenging those positions as to who's the administrator, the trustee, and the beneficiary. And if you can get those in their proper role, you as a beneficiary actually have the authority to replace a trustee. If they're not doing their job, you can actually change that, who's the trustee. But if the presumption when you go in courts of law work on many, many presumptions, if you do not rebut the presumption that I'm not the trustee, I'm the beneficiary, they continue along the presumption that you're the trustee and they are the administrator and the beneficiary. So that part there has to be challenged. And you have to know how to address that. And that maybe I'll get into that in later shows. So we've gone from the one where the Lord set that up with man. From there, when you're born, your parents create a trust, and that actually is for your benefit, and then the state sets one up for that. Now, I first started looking at this, I'm like, well, why do we have to do all this with these trusts anyway? This seems kind of ridiculous. I just want to dissolve this thing and get out from all this. Well, there are benefits, and one of the examples that I ran across was that if, let's say I buy a home and there's no trustee, there's nothing there with the state, and I'm the only one who has the record. I have legal title and equitable title. Well, a gang comes in and beats me up, throws me out of my own home, and I go to the police and I said, well, these guys just beat me up, threw me out of my own home. Oh, okay, well, do you have a well, no, it's been, well, too bad, so sad. But if the state actually has legal title, then I can go there and say, hey, these guys just beat me up, threw me out of my own home, and go, oh, well, let's go to the records. But, oh, it is yours. So, see, there are benefits to having these trusts. But the problem is that these roles get jockeyed around. And as I had mentioned in previous shows, we end up in this, back with the Sesta KB Trust, where your presumed lost at sea, presumed to be dead. There's other issues, too, where you are presumed not to be in your right mind, basically. Funny as that may sound, and I'll give you an example. If you hire an attorney, and you can look these up in Black's Law Dictionary and others, Bouvier's, if you hire an attorney, you become a ward of the state. And if you look up, or a ward of the court, if you look up a ward, that means somebody that's mentally incompetent or an infant. And that's why when you hire an attorney and you go to court, you're not allowed to speak because you're presumed to be of diminished capacity. And this is how this ends up being, and this is why when you go in again into court with the trust, they're on the presumption, operating on a presumption that they have to manage this trust for you because you're not capable of managing it for yourself. And unless and until you protest that, challenge that presumption, it stands. That's just a maxim of law that a presumption stands unless it's refuted or rebutted. And so you have to do that. You have to know how to do that. So that's about it, I think, right now on these trusts. I can't really think right now of any more. Oh, yes. So there's this chain of trusts where they seem to be built one off of the other. A lot of people, what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, well, I'm just going to undo this trust that the state made. And that's certainly one of the ways that you can proceed with that, is just eliminate the trust. And again, you can do that. The problem is now you're going to have a problem getting any type of driver's license or any other type of licenses, which you really don't have to have, but they can make life easier. The other way is to actually get hold of that trust and take ownership of that trust where you are the beneficiary and you claim that, and then as the sole beneficiary of that trust, you can then challenge the administrator and trustees if they're not handling that in the proper way. So anyway, that's about all I had for the trust this evening. It's going to be a little short of a show. I was kind of caught off guard this evening. Had a couple things come up that threw me for a loop. Anyhow, so I guess that's about it. And we'll be back here next week and go from there. Have a good evening.